I do for you people.
I'm assuming that most people over the age of 4 have an idea of the general plot of Cinderella, so I won't waste time summarizing it. Cinderella is, in my opinion, one of the most maligned of the fairy tale princesses. She doesn't stand up for herself, she just does what she's told, she married the first rich guy she met, she's a gold digger.
Your tale as old as time, sets us back 50 years. Do your chores, clean the floors, till a man just appears.
And yeah, Cindy may seem like the embodiment of that hashtag tradwife life that's in vogue on TikTok right now, but I just think that reading is unfair and a bit surface level. It speaks to a refusal to see the complexities in the story for children. The most common criticisms debunking Cinderella stories include, why does the shoe only fit Cinderella's foot? Because they're magic shoes made specifically for her feet and her feet alone. Do you know how hard it would be realistically to get your foot into a glass shoe? Also, for a lot of these adaptations, there's the in-universe explanation that Cinderella just has unnaturally small feet. In one of the Disney sequels, it's mentioned that Cinderella canonically wears a 4.5. Let's assume that's in women's sizes in the US, since Disney is a US-based company, though realistically they would measure shoes according to European standard sizes. For comparison, I wear a size 9, so Cinderella's feet would literally be half of this size. So yes, Cinderella would most likely be the only adult woman with feet small enough to fit the slipper. Why doesn't the prince just remember what Cinderella looks like or ask for her name? Well, for one thing, in most adaptations, the prince himself isn't going door to door asking for Cinderella. He outsources that shit. So the Grand Duke, or whoever, has to go by description. Blonde hair and blue eyes could describe any number of girls. It's not enough. The shoe is concrete evidence of Cinderella's identity since, again, Cinderella has distinctly small feet. As for the name, you have to remember, Cinderella is in disguise at the ball. Her stepfamily isn't supposed to know she's there, so obviously she's not going to introduce herself with her actual name. Oh, they fell in love in one night, that's realistic. Yeah, it's a f***ing fairy tale. What do you want? But the most important question of all, the question I want to address. Why does Cinderella stay in the house with her abusive family? This question is multifaceted and extremely complicated to answer, and since there are 600 bazillion versions of Cinderella with their own explanation as to why she stays, I think in order to give something even close to a definitive answer, we're going to have to look at how Cinderella has been told and retold throughout the ages. I don't know, for some reason my heart drew me to this topic, and a dream, or so I'm told, is a wish your heart makes. Now, there's not enough time in the world to go through every single adaptation of Cinderella. You don't want that, I don't want that. So for convenience's sake, I've cut down the list to the most popular and, I think, influential versions, the ones that are most relevant to our conversation. Also, these are just mostly the ones I've heard of and could be bothered to review. Hey, there's gonna be a lot of foot content. I'm not shaming your kink, but I don't want to see anyone being weird in the comments. Now, it's important to note that, as fables go, Cinderella tends to transcend culture. A lot of countries have their own iteration. The ones we'll be looking at are mainly influenced by Charles Perrault's version from 1697, and yes, this list comes from an extremely white American viewpoint. So, we might as well start with the most definitive version of Cinderella in the English-speaking world. Cinderella, you're as lovely as your name. Disney's 1950 animated classic Cinderella is pretty much a cut-and-dried retelling of the classic story, with some Tom and Jerry antics to pad the runtime. It's the version you probably grew up with. There's a girl, she lives with her stepfamily, they treat her like shit, she sneaks off to the ball, shoe fits, happily ever after. Then there's the two direct-to-VHS sequels, Dreams Come True and A Twist in Time. Honestly, Dreams Come True is basically a bunch of one-shot Cinderella fanfics, and it's cute and all, but it really isn't worth talking about. Twist in Time, on the other hand, is surprisingly good. In this one, Anastasia manages to steal the fairy godmother's wand, and Lady Tremaine uses it to go back in time and make it to where the slipper fits Anastasia's big ol' foot, and she gets engaged to the prince. By the way, if you thought the prince was boring and had no character in the original movie, you should really watch Twist in Time.
I forbid you to take another step down these stairs!
Okay.
We stan a chaotic boy. And then there is the shameless live-action cash grab, which blessedly has less talking animal antics, but is easily the second most pointless Disney remake, the first being Lion King. It's not trying to be a new take on an old classic like Maleficent or Cruella, the latter actually being a guilty pleasure for me, nor is it a wokeified, trying way too hard to appease CinemaSins remake like Dumbo, Aladdin, or Beauty and the Beast. It just sort of exists. In this one, Ella is a doormat because her dying Peggy Carter mom told her to always be nice. So she just takes abuse and never leaves, even though she could leave at any time, apparently.
Why do you stay there when they treat you so?
And stepmom Hella hates her because...
Because you are young and innocent and good, and I...
Okay. Speaking of live action, though...
All and fiddly-dee, fiddly-faddly-faddle. All the wishes in the world are poppycock and twaddle.
This is the best Cinderella. It just is. There have been 3 screen adaptations of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, but the most well-known and beloved version is the 1997 film starring Brandy and Whitney Houston. And what I like is that it doesn't rely on gimmicks. It's just simple, and it trusts its source material as a foundation. And it has a lot of talented people involved. Like, damn. I didn't know Jason Alexander had it in him.
My name's Buck Naked. I'm a porno actor.
And of course, Cinderella is one of the main characters in the musical Into the Woods, this time played by Anna Kendrick. The stepmother is played by the fabulous Christine Baranski, and one of the stepsisters is Lucy Punch, who has somehow played a stepsister in 4 separate Cinderella adaptations. The stepfamily doesn't have a huge role, but they do get their Brothers Grimm ending. One sister cuts off her toe to fit the slipper, the other cuts off her heel, and in the end, Cinderella's bird friends peck their eyes out. Sondheim's Into the Woods subverts the typical fairy tale tropes, so this is the rare version where Cinderella marries the prince but then leaves him, because this Prince Charming is a cheating douche. Deviating from the traditional keep sweet and obey type Cinderellas, we have Cinderella but rebellious, outspoken feminist icon. If you recall last year, I did a reading of Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, which serves as a sort of origin story / deconstruction of Cinderella. Basically in this version, this powerful fairy named Lucinda gave Ella the gift of obedience at birth, which magically compels her to do everything she's told, and Ella seeks to defy this curse and establish her independence. In the end, she manages to break the spell because it puts her love, Prince Charmant, in danger, and she's able to finally get out from under her stepfamily's thumb and be happy. It's an excellent book. And then there's the movie. Woohoo! Copyrighted music, copyrighted music. Bibbidi bobbidi boo. They do this stupid thing where they go overboard in trying to make Ella a hashtag girl boss, and she's a social justice warrior, and she's not like other girls. This book was already pretty overtly empowering. It did not need all of this neoliberal frippery, nor did it need pop culture references and fucking musical numbers of modern songs. Princess Diaries was a really excellent movie that was adapted from a subpar book, so it's like the universe felt it had to balance it out with a subpar movie adapted from an excellent book. And that's 2004's Ella Enchanted. You know what, if this shit is what needed to happen to get Hugh Dancy cast in Hannibal, I suppose it was worth it. Ever After, starring Drew Barrymore, is similar to Ella Enchanted, the movie, in that Danielle, the Cinderella character, stands up for the rights of the underprivileged, but it works better for the narrative. In Ever After, Danielle stands up for the poor and mistreated because that's what she is. It makes sense because this kind of abuse and inequality is something she sees and experiences firsthand every day. It relates back to the main theme of Cinderella itself. Ella Frel advocates for ogres who are ruthless people eaters because... reasons. Also, movie Ella hates Charmant simply on principle because he's privileged. I mean, I agree, eat the 1%, but there is really no reason for her to hate him specifically. It just comes off as liking the prince is for stupid girly girls and I'm not like them. Reminds me of when I was 14 and Bieber fever was like at an all-time high, except for me, I was the only one in the class who wasn't Justin Bieber crazy. It's because I was gay. Whereas Danielle's initial dislike of Prince Henry is founded because he sucks.
The plight of the everyday rustic bores me.
I gather you do not converse with many peasants.
Certainly not, no.
Nevertheless, it's still an excellent movie. Angelica Houston as the evil stepmother is frankly the best stepmother casting ever. Sorry, Kate Blanchett stands, but it's true. Also, since this version is presented as historical fiction rather than a fairy tale, there is no magic, and the fairy godmother character is replaced by Leonardo da Vinci?
Da Vinci?
But the absolute S-tier, peak girl boss, not your grandmama's Cinderella retelling has got to be
That's future queen, yeah!
Can't believe they dragged Billy Porter into this. Simply escaping her stepfamily and marrying the prince isn't enough for this funky fresh Cinderella. Oh no, none of that parochial bullshit. This Cinderella wants to be a small business owner. But the kingdom is misogyny, and women aren't allowed to do financial independence. But Cindy really wants to sell her ugly dresses. And also, the queer-coded princess deserves the crown more than her idiot frat boy brother because she believes in climate change. Well, sorry ladies, no girl bosses allowed in this kingdom. Ella Enchanted walked, so this could fall flat on its face. The stepfamily isn't even really the problem here. They're more the result of an unfair patriarchal society that treats women as commodities. The conflict is not man versus man, but man versus society. Which wouldn't be such a bad change in theory if the narrative didn't beat you over the head with the message. Girls are smart! Girls are capable! Misogyny bad! More girl bosses! Idina Menzel's stepmom is actually, I think, the best part of this movie. The stepmother is the most grounded character, because she isn't cartoonishly evil or greedy, she's just realistically concerned for her daughter's futures. You know, like a mom would be. And Idina's songs are the best numbers in the whole movie. Well, apart from Fab G's song.
Truly be what you can truly be, not you but me. Skippity bop da bop and chop a chick up and hey yo!
What kind of blackmail does James Corden have on everyone in Hollywood that he keeps being allowed to be in movie musicals? And then there are the Cinderellas that truly go their own direction. A Cinderella Story is a modern retelling of Cinderella, and it is the most 2004 thing ever, complete with all of the early aughts teen movie cliches, like the mean popular girl, the quirky quasi-gay best friend, the big dance, Chad Michael Murray.
You're throwing away your dream.
Say the line, Bart!
No, Dad. Throwing away yours.
Hilary Duff is our Cinderella, and Jennifer Coolidge is the evil stepmother, second best stepmother casting ever. Also, Cinderella doesn't leave behind a slipper, she leaves behind a flip phone. Jennifer Coolidge forces Hilary Duff to work her ass off at the family diner because Sam wants money to go to college. But surprise, she was never gonna let Sam go to college! And thanks to the modern setting, this is the rare version where Cinderella stands up to the stepmother and moves out. And of course, Sam's not like other girls. She likes sports, and she doesn't count calories like those other basic bitches.
Would you rather have a rice cake or a Big Mac?
A Big Mac. What does that matter?
Well, I like a girl with a hearty appetite. And besides, you just eliminated about 50% of the girls in our class.
Gag me. One of the main antagonists of the anime-inspired Western animation RWBY is a Cinderella analog named Cinderfall. See, in RWBY, everyone is based on a character from a fairy tale, or mythology, or ice cream flavors. Cinderella works for the Wicked Witch of the West, and it is her life's mission to steal the magical powers of the legendary Four Maidens. You know what? It's not that important. Cinderella's backstory is basically that she was adopted from an orphanage by a hotel owner who basically made her a child slave, torturing her with a shock collar whenever she disobeyed. A huntsman takes pity on her and teaches her how to fight, only for Cinderella to kill her adoptive family and him in cold blood. The YA novel Cinder by Marissa Meyer is a retelling that envisions Cinderella as a cyborg, living as a second-class citizen in a cyberpunk future version of China. In this version, the glass slipper is a prosthetic cybernetic foot. And spoilers for the novel, go ahead and mute the video until the spoiler warning below disappears. Surprise! Cinder is not actually a human, but a mutant from Earth's moon colony, and double surprise, she's the long-lost moon princess! A not at all predictable plot twist. And she has magic X-Man powers, and is the most specialist girl in all the land! Okay, spoilers over. The Disney Channel original movie Camp Rock is an abstract retelling of Cinderella. Mitchie, played by Demi Lovato at the height of their Disney career, is a working-class girl who dreams of going to a special music camp for future pop stars. But when she gets the chance to go at a discounted rate, she finds that most of the campers are classist assholes. Instead of an evil stepfamily, Mitchie's parents are very much alive, there's the mean girl Tess and her minions, who take Mitchie under their wing when Mitchie lies about being rich and having industry connections. The prince in this story is a stuck-up bad boy rock star played by Joe Jonas, the hottest Jonas brother. Fight me, Nick Stans. And instead of leaving behind a shoe, Joe overhears Mitchie singing and instantly falls in love with the mysterious voice. Mitchie's lie is eventually revealed and she's humiliated, but she stands up to Tess and sings her way back into Joe Jonas's heart. And finally, Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron completely turns the Cinderella legend on its head. The main character is a lesbian named Sophia who lives in a community that basically amounts to Jonestown if Jim Jones used the tale of Cinderella to force his disciples into submission. Women have basically no rights, and young girls starting from the age of 16 can be snapped up by any man who wants to own them. And that's the good option compared to what happens if they're not chosen. Sophia, who would rather die than be forced to marry a man and be a slave for the rest of her life, rebels against the absolute rule of the king and joins forces with the last living descendant of the stepsisters to bring him down. In more modern retellings of the Cinderella story, we see that there is an inclination to empower Cinderella, and by extension, the little girls who are watching. Because for modern audiences, a lady who does what she's told and marries rich just doesn't cut it anymore. It's no coincidence that Disney adapted Cinderella in 1950, the 50s being a decade in America that is characterized by strict gender roles and traditional domestic values. The 50s were coming off of World War II, and when the fellas went off to war, it was asked of the ladies to step up and take over the jobs that their husbands and brothers left open. For the first time in America, a large portion of women were making up the workforce. For a lot of them, it was a very liberating experience. So suffice it to say that a lot of them were disappointed when the war was over, the men returned, and women were told to go home and resume their expected role as a homemaker. They didn't want to go back to the way things were. So here's Walt Disney with a tale about an impossibly kind and subservient woman who dutifully does her chores and is rewarded with a husband of wealth and stature, an example for little girls everywhere. I can 100% empathize with the disdain for that story, but also, it's not just about doing your chores and marrying a rich guy. For one thing, like American women in the 1950s, American white women, I am aware that most women of color in the US had to work as domestic servants. Women in the 1600s didn't exactly have a lot of opportunities. For many women, your only option for a better life was marrying wealthy, especially if you were born to a family that maybe didn't treat you all that well. And that's what speaks to me about Cinderella. I don't see a good little submissive or a gold-digging opportunist. I see someone who survived years of cruelty and abuse and finally got out. Most likely the stepmother was never going to let Cinderella marry off and leave the house. She'd be stuck waiting on the stepmother hand and foot for the rest of her life. And once she died, the manor surely would have been inherited by one of the stepsisters, definitely not Cinderella. So what were Cinderella's options? Stay in the house where she grew up, where maybe people aren't that nice to her, but at least she would have food to eat and a roof over her head, or leave and take her chances with homelessness. She had no money, she had no friends except talking animals, her fairy godmother showed up all of once to help her. Sometimes life doesn't offer very good choices. Sometimes all we can do is make the best of the hand we're dealt. As for the marriage to the prince, I like to think that's the story's way of telling the audience that things can change, that you can and should walk away from an abusive situation when it's safe to do so. No matter how disheartening the situation got, Cinderella never gave up hope, never fully surrendered to her victimhood, and her resilience was rewarded in the end. At least, that's my optimistic interpretation. You can keep reading it with that cynical, dismissive lens if you want. But to me, the tale of Cinderella is one of resistance.